Hello everyone, today I'll be creating a to-do list entirely inside of Plasmic with no code plus a little bit of code written by ChatGPT, and so anyone can follow along. I'll be showing you in great detail what I do each step. So first step, I'll go to dribble.com, look for inspirations on what a to-do list might look like, so I have an idea what I want to build. And I found a couple of variations, but we can support these variations later. Let's go ahead with this basic structure here, where you can check to complete and add new tasks. So next, let's head over to plasmic.app. If you don't have an account yet, please click on the link in the video description below. So that will help me out greatly creating more content like this. Alright, so now in Plasmic, let's create a new project. And then let's use the blank project template. Wait for it to load. So first step, we want to create the list item. And the list item will be consisting of an icon and a text. So for the icon, let's go to Figma, and what I want to use is the Figma official icons because they look simple. So this is the library you can find in the community called UI2, and let's look for a check icon. And I kind of want to have it squarish rather than a circle. So I can remix the two icons. Let's detach, copy this check mark, and select this triangle and replace it. Then select the two and then center everything. We don't need this union, so let's detach that as well. So here is our check mark, and the default state will be without the check mark. So let's copy the SVG, go back to Plasmic, and then just paste. And the size here is pasted to 16 by 16, which is a little off. We want it to be 32 by 32, which is the actual size of the icon itself. So make sure that you're changing the width and height under the design tab. Next, let's select the icon plus the text and hit Shift Option Command H to create a horizontal stack. Then let's make sure we center everything and put the SVG to the left. And then we don't need the padding on the left because the SVG padding itself would suffice. So this will be our item component. Let's create a component. And let's call it item. So we can go inside of the component and let's create a new variant. Let's create a toggle variant. Let's call it checked. Then on checked, of course, you don't want this SVG, you want the other one, that is the checked icon that we just made. And let's copy the SVG from Figma, go back to Plasmic, then under the replace image, click that, and then here select this input box, and then just paste. You can see that the two different variants have two different SVGs inside of them. Next thing is that we want to expose a on-click event outside of this component so that it can be handled from outside. So let's take a look at what it looks like out from outside right now. So under the settings tab, under interactions, your item will not have any interaction available because it doesn't expose any interactions at its current state. So we want to go back in. Now let's select this SVG. We want to give a click event here. And so under the settings tab again, on the interactions, click this plus. And we want to add a on-click interactions. And you don't need to fill any of the form here. Just click on the blank and then close that. We want to expose this on-click event. So let's right click and then look at the link to a property for component item, which is this component that we're currently in, and let's create a new prop. This will be readable from outside, so let's call it on item click. Whatever name you give it, it's whatever name you're going to be able to see outside of this component. So the type is correct. It's an event handler. Let's hit confirm. And let's go under the component data tab. We're going to create a variable. Let's call it completed and of type Boolean. This is going to indicate whether it is completed or not. So allow external read and write access, confirm. So now let's go to our homepage where we are using the instance of this. You can see that the variant we have a checked or not, but we want this variant to be dictated by the completed property, which is a Boolean. And let's right click, use dynamic value. And we're going to click on this single option and save. So now if this is on, then it is checked. If this is off, then it is unchecked. So that's exactly what we want, because ultimately this needs to come from the data. And so let's go to page data. There, under the state variables, hit plus, and we're going to create items that supposedly holds all of the items, and it's going to be of type array. Let's put something here. Inside of the array, there needs to be a list of objects, and each object is going to contain a title. By default, let's call it put your title here and comma. Another thing will be the completed state. By default, set it to false, so hit save. Now we have only one item inside of this array, confirm. Now we're going to repeat this item according to the number of records we have in that array. So first of all, let's put it inside of a vertical container. Right click, wrap in container, vertical stack. You can also use the Shift Option V in the future for shortcut. Let's hit A for hugging, and let's get rid of the padding just for now, and drag the container to make it a bit bigger. And let's make this under the design, fill the entire width, so stretch. And so now we're going to, under the settings tab, while you have the item selected, let me show you the tree. While you have the item instance selected, we're going to hit the plus button on the repeat element. So this will repeat it, but according to a collection. A collection just means an array, and we're going to choose the items array, although it only have one object inside of it, but don't worry. So that is going to repeat one time because we have one item. But the important thing is that under the completed, we're going to right click and use dynamic value. Now we're going to use the current item completed. So this is coming from the data. So let's hit save. Another thing should come from the data is actually the text. So let's go inside of this component yet again and select the text. So right click on the content and use dynamic value. Okay, so now we don't have title yet. So let's create a title variable. Under the component data, let's create a state variable and call it title. It's going to be text. And initially, let's just put something here. I don't know if that will do anything, but let's make sure that it is externally accessible, read and write, and confirm. So this is going to listen to the title that we're just created. So the title is going to dictate the content, and outside of this component, we are going to dictate this title by our data. Now again, current item, title, save. So now let me show you, if the data ever changes, the changes are immediately going to be reflected onto the interface. So let's create a second record here. And for the sake of it, let's just copy whatever we have inside of here, and let's change some text and make the complete instead of false, make it true. Save. So you see that the interface now has two items, but the checked here is not working. Let's debug it. So right click on the checked and clear, because the checked is going to be dictated by the complete variable, but this logic should be done by the component itself. So let's go inside of the component and select this checked state. So we have now two states, the base state and the check state. Select the check state until this box turns red. And then under the component variants, right click on the checked state. We're going to use dynamic value again, essentially just dictating this by this variable called completed that it has. So let's now go back to the home page. Now, if it is completed, then it's checked. If it is not completed, then it is not checked. Let's go and also add a stroke on the text if it is checked here. So under the design tab, we're going to, on the decorate, put a line through here. And let's also make a bit of the visibility, for example, 60. You reduce a bit of the visibility to say that is no longer, you don't need to worry about it anymore because it's no longer effective. So yeah, let's go here to the home page, and you can see that looks a bit nicer. Next thing we're going to do is that we're actually going to make this checkbox clickable. So let's select the item, and under the settings tab, scroll all the way down till you see interactions. So let's hit the plus. Remember this on item click that we exposed out of the component itself? Now it's time to use it. So let's click that, and the action is going to be update the state. What state we're going to update is just the current item completed. This one we're going to update. And we don't need a new value, we just want to toggle. So we're going to toggle the false to true, toggle the true to false. That's all we need. So let's hit L on your keyboard, and we can play here. So anywhere else you click, it doesn't matter, but if you click on the checkbox, it is going to toggle the completed state of your item. Perfect, now that's all good. Let's hit escape to go back. And the next step we want to do is that we want the user to actually be able to input the title here. And the tricky part of that is that title can actually be multi-line if you think about it. So let's go inside of the component and think about how we're going to approach this. Now you can press Q if you have any container selected to bring up the insertion menu, and let's search for multi-line input. Now the problem with multi-line input is really that it has this very ugly looking double dash line here on the bottom right hand corner, and it's very hard to customize it, and also it doesn't support auto resizing when the text grows. So let's go back. We're not going to use multi-line here. It's too much effort to customize. And but if we use like a traditional text input, it doesn't support multi-line input, and plus it has this border and padding we don't really want. Luckily, Plasmic supports all the React component you can find on the internet. And one of my favorite React component for exactly this use case is called unstyled text area auto size. You can find this on GitHub. It's an open source React component library. Just this one component, and to install you just copy this line here. If you don't understand what this means, you can ask ChatGPT. But to expose a code component such as this to be drag and droppable inside of Plasmic Studio, you need to register it in code to Plasmic. And so here I'll show you how to do that. Let's open Visual Studio Code, new terminal, and let's write yarn create Plasmic app. Then you're going to be confronted with a couple of questions. What do you want to name your local project repository? So let's call it Plasmic-to-do. Make sure that everything is lowercase and without space. Let's use TypeScript, and let's use Next.js, and let's select CodeGen. This is very important. And then let's copy the URL of your entire Plasmic project. Hit enter and proceed. And now you just need to wait for it to finish, install all the packages and dependencies, and then set up your code project for you. Depends on your internet speed, it might take 1 to 5 minutes. And when it is done, you want to say open /. This will direct you to where you have your project installed. And let's drag this folder into VS Code. And you want to take a look inside of the pages folder here we have our Plasmic host. This is where we register all our code components we want to use inside of Plasmic. Now remember the component we want to use, and that's over on GitHub. Here's how we install it. So let's copy this line and go back to VS Code and new a terminal. So we just paste it here and hit enter. Wait for it to install. Now it finished. Only took 2 seconds. So then we want to import this code unstyled text area auto size. Then we're going to register it. That, and close off this bracket. So inside of there, we need the name to have it displayed inside of Plasmic, and the import path. So this is where the component is actually living inside of our code base, and then the props. The props is what we are going to see on our right hand side panel inside of Plasmic. So the first one is the value. Now this is going to be a string, yes, a type string, and then on value change, it is going to be of type event handler. Oops, let's get rid of this space I mistyped here. So in event handler, when this event fires, we need to know what happened. We need to know what has been typed inside of this input. And so we need to provide arguments, and we need to specify the argument types here. It's going to be an array because you can have multiple arguments, but the first argument is going to be named event traditionally. And then this type is going to be an object. So this is really everything we need to do in VS Code. Now let's run this project by writing yarn space dev and hit enter. So this is the URL that your project is deployed on. Let's copy that and go back to Plasmic. On where your project name is, hit the ellipse and then choose configure project. Let's change the URL from HTTPS to HTTP and paste whatever we copied. Add a slash and Plasmic dash host and slash. This final slash is very important here, and hit confirm. It's going to reload your entire Plasmic project, and then you will be confronted with your registered code component. And now all we need to do is to drag and drop to place the code component onto canvas. Here is the value that we specified to expose from the code. Remember here, we specified that we want to expose two props. The first prop is the value, type is a string. The second prop is on value change. So here is the first prop. The second prop is on value change. That is an interaction. So we want to right click on the value and use a dynamic value. We're going to use the title and hit save. So now we no longer need the regular text because we want this editable one. And let's style it a bit. I feel like 11 pixel, it's more balanced with this checkbox here. And you can also, of course, change the color to see how well the code component is working with native Plasmic panel. The next thing is that you will see a bit of problem when you actually edit this text. It is multi-line, but it has this ugly blue border here. Now let's open console and let's do a select and select this div here. If I press the half and enter here, I check the focus visible, then you will see this blue border thing. I don't know what it is, but it appears to be like a native HTML behavior. So this is where we want to consult ChatGPT preferably 4.0, and let's ask it, write me the, okay, let me disable the visualize on my keyboard, write me the CSS that disables the stroke color on div focus visible. And let's see what it says. Okay. Here. We're just gonna copy this. We're gonna copy this and let's go back to Plasmic. And then in the homepage is where we are going to press Q to add a CSS. And let's go to the settings, embed CSS. Let's just paste whatever ChatGPT wants us to say here. And now let's try it. So here, when I am editing this, it no longer show me the blue border thing. And so that is perfect. Let's go back. And the next thing we want to do is to make it actually be able to alter the data. And then we can display the data here using this block of text. Let's also make it the same size. And under the settings, we're going to use dynamic data for the content. Now it's just going to display the items, but we're going to stringify it to make it look like raw. So there's a trace on stringify function, and wrap this inside of a square bracket. And so here you see the actual data here being output. And if we pass it a null and a string of /t, then it will format this to look better. So let's hit save. And now we can make the two horizontally aligned side by side. I think that looks good. Let's make this a little bit smaller size here. I'm going to reduce the width a bit. Next step, we're going to actually let the user input affect the actual data on the title here. So for that, we need to pipe out the user input event from within the component itself outward so that we can use it here on the home page. So let's go inside of the item component yet again and click on this code component that we registered. Remember, we have another event handler registered, and that is called onValueChange. So onValueChange, what happens? We're going to update the variable of title to a new value of, let's switch to data picker, of event. Why? Because just for reference, let's go back inside of the registration of our component, and this is the name of our component, and then it has a value prop, it has an onValueChange prop. So now we're calling this, and it has an argument to let us know what the user did, and the argument is, first argument is called event. So that is why we are using the event here. So basically what happens is that the event is going to tell us what the user typed, and that data is going to be pushed to the title variable here. So let's go outside of here. Now let's take a look at the component data. This title, when the user is inputting, that event is going to update the title. And the title is used where? The title is used on the value here. So let's test it out. If it all works right, then if I type something here, this will change. That is because the value is using the title, because the title is changed, hence the value changes. Hence the interface here changes. So now there is another event automatically generated, and that is called onTitleChange. This is what we're going to use outside. So that is indicating that whenever this title has changed. So that is event handler as well. So let's go to homepage and use this. So let's select the item instance, and scroll to the bottom, and we're gonna add an interaction that is on title change. We're going to update the current item's title. Now this is the data, remember? We're going to update the title of the data to what? To this val here. Val is just the short name for value, and that tells us what happened when the onTitle change fires. Basically what the title changed to. So now let's test it out. If everything works correctly, my input here will update the data in real time so that you can see everything is working in perfect order. And lastly, we just need the ability to add and remove items from the data here. So to add, we need a button, add item, how about that? So I'll just use a text layer and wrap it inside of a horizontal stack to pretend that this is a button. Of course, you can make it a real button component later, but the point is that we can just get by with this for now. Add an on-click event. So the data we're going to change is this items, where we store all of our data, and to a new value of, let's first of all go to the data picker and find the old value. So because we're going to add on top of it. For this, I'm going to use the spread syntax. So put it inside of a square bracket, and at the very beginning, add ... Just going to spread the old value inside of the new array. At the end, we're going to add a comma and paste in what we copied. And let's just, for easier identification, new item, let's call this one. And it's of course not going to be completed. Save. If everything goes well, let's test it out. So we should be able to add item just like that. Look, how cool is that? So of course you can also add it, the title, and also complete it just like that. So let's go back. Now we just need the ability to remove item. Back to the item component we go, and let's make the, so under the base variant, let's make the width fill the entire container. And we want to add a button here to delete the item. So let's find such a suitable icon. In Figma, this is what is used because like whenever you add something, you remove it by clicking the minus. So I'll just stick with this. So let's paste it here and correct this size to be 3232. And then let's spread out the width of this text so that it pushes the button to the right side, and let's have a bit of a margin so that they don't stick together, the text and the button. I want this to only appear on hover, so let's add a hover interactive state and overwrite the visibility here to be visible, and here let's make it right click and not rendered. So let's actually make this its own component, because I also want a hover state for this as well. Let's call this delete button, or let's actually call it icon button, because supposedly it can contain any icon. So don't worry about that error. I think that will go away when you click anywhere. So let's go inside of the icon button, and on hover we want to make it a bit darker, and where's the background? Yeah, it doesn't have a container, that's why it doesn't have a background. So on the base variant, let's unhide the SVG and right click and wrap it inside of a container. Then let's zero out the paddings on all sides and make sure that it always fixes to 32 by 32. So on the hover, we want to select the container and give it a background of, how about E? I kind of like that. So go back to item component. Here on the hover, we need to show this button. If I can click it. So let's check it out. Now on hover, you see this button appear. If you hover this button, then it turns gray. Awesome. So we want to expose the on-click event on this button, because right now it doesn't have a on-click event, I believe. See, so let's go back inside of a icon button. Again on the base, select the horizontal stack, just add a onClick and don't care about what is there. That is no, right click, and we link it to a prop, call it onClick. This is how we expose it. So now the onClick should be visible here, and then we want to further expose it. So this onClick, we want to expose it again to a new prop. Let's call on delete, so that this on delete is then visible on the homepage. And so here, click on any of the item in your homepage and add an interaction. Let's select on delete this time. So on delete, what happens? We want to make the items operation. We can choose remove elements. So the amount of elements to remove is of course just 1, and the index, let's use the dynamic value, just current index, then done. Let's try it out. So add item, let's call this 3, let's call this 4. If I remove the second one is gone. If I remove the fourth one is gone. That looks very good. So to wrap things up, we have a bit of styling to do. So first of all, let's make sure that this button falls in alignment with everything else. The text shouldn't be selectable here. And we want to actually give it a hover state, so we need to create this a component. So onClick event, let's copy everything here. We're going to delete the onClick event, unset, and we're going to call this add button and create as component. Then we don't have the interaction anymore. That's why we need to go inside of here and expose it. So we want to expose an interaction, onClick, and then right click, create a new prop, just call it onClick. Then on the homepage, we can still paste back in whatever we just copied. And so this will be a new value of this. And then let's go back inside of our component. Yeah, the text, why is the text this big? So we can make the text a bit smaller and the height. Okay, so we want to add a hover, so that on hover this button turns darker, brings that to, wait, why is the other one turning darker, not the hover? Okay, so I was like, maybe I see something. I'm seeing things. So okay, so let's test it out. That looks much better in my opinion. And we want to add a effect, so that on hover we want to turn our cursor to this lovely pointer. Let's test it out. Yeah, that looks more convincing as a button. So this side of the things, we still need to keep it, because we want to always have reference before we are done with everything, because we are heavily going to rely on the actual data here. So because everything here is rendered by the data. Next thing is that we can actually add a divider. So let's go inside of the item. On the base, we can actually add a divider. So on enter the border, let's click the bottom border and make it solid. Yeah, let's just keep it black as it is right now. And the last one shouldn't have a border. So if you know what I mean, I will add a toggle and call this the last item. This one shouldn't have a border, so let's just cancel this, set it to none, right? So, and then how do we know that it is the last item? Well, here in the home page, we click on the item, and under the settings, we have our last item here. Right click, use dynamic value. If the index is equal to the state items length -1, then it is the last one. Otherwise, it is not the last one. So let's try it out. Yeah, you can see that the last item doesn't have that divider, and everything in between has that. So a lot of styling you can do, without breaking anything. So with that, I will wrap up this episode. So in the next episode, I will be implementing the drag and drop feature to allow you to easily rearrange your items, plus being able to nest items within items, and also use Airtable to save and retrieve the data. And then at the end, I'll be walking you through how to deploy the project onto the internet so that everyone can use. It's been Mr. Biscuit. I hope you find it enjoyable creating apps in this way. Please like the video and subscribe to my channel. They help me support more awesome content like this. And I hope to see you in the next episode. Bye bye.